Have you ever thought about Jesus as a soldier going into enemy-occupied territory to rescue prisoners of war? Because that's what happened. The season of Lent is supposed to prepare us for the single most important thing that ever happened in history, which is Jesus' death and resurrection. But we've heard that stuff before, so it can seem trite and boring. Yeah, Jesus died for my sins. Yeah, Jesus rose from the dead. So that's why thinking about it in a different way, such as Jesus as a soldier rescuing prisoners of war, can be super appealing. If a Marine falls behind enemy lines, his mates go in after him. They've made a commitment to him as a person, and so they're willing to risk themselves to bring him back. Likewise, Jesus saw us, his people, captured. He saw us behind enemy lines, and so he went in. So here's how it all went down. In the beginning, God looked at everything he created and saw it was good, very good. But there was this enemy, and the enemy knew that he couldn't defeat God directly. So he decided to do it indirect and say, I'm going to hurt the ones that you love. And so he captured the human race, enslaving us to sin, and brought death into the world. But Jesus the Marine saw that his own, i.e. us, were captured, trapped, and enslaved. The earth was now enemy-occupied territory, so he made a covert landing in the form of a baby in the middle of nowhere. The forces of the enemy tried to kill him, but too late. The plot was known, and he managed to escape. He grew up pretty much unknown in a backwater city called Nazareth. I guess city is too strong of a word. But he still knew his mission, which is to rescue his captive people. There was a messenger that testified to his coming, and it worked for a time, but then the enemy killed him. Then Jesus began his public ministry of teaching, healing, preaching, and then there was opposition from the enemy, from those in cahoots with him. Eventually put him on a collision course with those in power, and they sentenced him to a horrible and shameful death. Except that was the plan the whole time. Because when the Eternal One, the Undying One, life himself died, it was death instead that died. Now the devil, the enemy's final weapon, death, no longer has its power. The captive people have been set free from sin by Jesus the Marine, who went in after them. Even as sin first entered the world, God promised to send someone who would redeem us from that slavery to sin. He made a covenant with us. This old covenant couldn't actually free us from sin, but it could prepare us for the one who could free us from sin. And throughout the Old Testament, we see this initial covenant with Adam and Eve slowly expanded and widened. This old covenant is preparing for the new covenant. Fun fact, testament is the Latin word that's translated for the word covenant. So the Old Testament is the Old Covenant. The New Testament is the New Covenant. If you didn't know that, now you do. A covenant is different from a contract. A contract exchanges goods or services. So like, hey, here's $10 in exchange for this meal. A covenant is between persons. It's an exchange of persons. I give you myself. You give me yourself. We see a few natural instances of covenants. Usually the first one people think of is marriage. I give you myself, you give me yourself. Although increasingly people are now seeing marriage as more of a contract, prenups and all of that stuff. But here's a couple more that you may not have thought of. So one of them, a natural covenant, is parenthood. I'm giving myself for this child. And then the Marines as another example. So it's not just I'm going to do these things, but actually I'm going in after you. It's a person-to-person thing. Want to hear covenant language? This is my body given up for you, says the couple to each other on their wedding night. That's covenant language. This is my body given up for you, says the parent to the screaming baby in the middle of the night. That's covenant language. This is my body given up for you, says the Marine as he rushes behind enemy lines for his fellow Marine. That's covenant language. So when I said earlier, as soon as sin entered the world, God made a covenant with us. It was not a contract. That was not a, you do these things for me and I do these things for you. It was a covenant, which means it's person to person. I am yours and you are mine. Whoa. And to be clear, actions still matter. To live in the covenant, you do respond a certain way, but the covenant comes first. So what we're doing for God is not actions primarily, it's giving of ourselves because he gives himself. Want to hear more covenant language? This is my body given up for you on the cross. This is my body given up for you in the Eucharist. Jesus gives us himself, not just what he'll do for us, but himself. That's mind-blowing, or at least should be. So as we enter the second half of Lent and prepare for Good Friday and Easter Sunday, think on what love the Father has for you, that to ransom a slave, us, he sent his Son. Peace. P.S. Be a hero today.